we're going to talk about angels, and we're going to, my intention, I'd like it to be our intention, is to get to a place of nuance. Okay. So, angel, Greek word angelos for messenger. It's also the same word in Hebrew means messenger for angel. That's pretty cool. As we were getting into, well, no, I guess we didn't get into this yet. So they are the angels of highest rank, putting that hierarchy back into place. And again, always noting that we can think of hierarchy as good at the top and lesser good going down, but I don't prescribe to that personally. It's a word. It describes a structure. It doesn't necessarily mean anything else.
More good or not as good. Yeah, I hear you. I agree that
Yeah.
I agree with the idea that even though there's a hierarchy, that doesn't mean more or less of anything. I think last time we were talking about this, we were talking about how, like, for example, the angels are seen as messengers, right? So messengers between what, for example, we can get into that. But then as we talk about higher levels of these beings, right? So archangel and, thrones, principalities, I forget the names, and then it goes up to cherubim and seraphim. Then we left off with the idea that, like, is it that they have a greater capacity for reflecting the source? And also this idea that they have different functions. So it's not good or bad or less bad necessarily.
Yeah, I want to get into the functions actually.
Yeah.
Because functions makes me the first thing that comes to mind in conceptual association is organs. So like systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Organ is strange. So that goes back to my possible obsession with personifying spirit. And just throwing this out there because there are not because there are 7 of them actually, not at all. But the other thing I think of is senses. So a sensory device, which would be something that perceives the environment, something that can hear the vibrations of an environment, something that can possibly consume or break down the environment. 7 in this case, so higher functioning being. And also in that same vein, get just as much excitement when I think of the 7 archangels as possibly even like aligned with the 7 chakras.
Okay, I see what you mean now. You're wanting to talk about the or just the archangels in this case.
Yeah.
Okay, in Coptic Orthodoxy are Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Suriel, Zedekiel, Saraciel, and Ananiel. Those, I could say those names so easily because, like, they're like, I've said them so many times in my in growing up. So Suriel means Prince of God. Zedekiel means Grace of God. Saraciel, supposedly, I don't know why it's unknown, or the source I'm looking at says unknown. And Ananiel means the reign of God.
Michael is he who is like God, or who like God.
Yes. And Gabriel is the might of God, or the strength of God.
Oh, okay.
And then Raphael is a healing, God heals. The hierarchy that they're proposing in angelology, I would say, angelology, yeah, is the first sphere is the angels that serve as the servants of God directly. So they communicate God's will to the other angels who are closer to
The material plane.
Yeah, closer to the material plane, closer to humans, essentially.
The 9, though, makes me feel like it's collectively dense, like it is a world. The metasphere,
Yeah.
the metasphere of angel, the angelic metasphere.
And that's what was being described, I think, like, like Dante's Inferno, Like, we think about Dante's Inferno as describing the layers of hell, but I also think that there's been a lot of the opposite of that, of kind of looking at the layers of heaven. And I wonder if a lot of this lore comes from Dante's Inferno, which is fiction, rather than actual, well, I mean, what fiction? Bible fiction. um,
Good save.
yeah.
In the spirit of kind of edging it forward,
Mhm.
it seems like spirit itself, the word spirit, can be used for anything in that
Mhm.
whole spectrum.
Mhm.
Spirit also, in my mind, being the same field as metasphere anyway.
Sure.
Now, the human overlay, because that would be the superlay, the battle between good and evil.
So yeah, there's this idea of this war, this heavenly war, right? And it's interesting because when we think about like archangel, often the idea of like a warrior angel comes up, like in the Hebrew kind of sense of like the chief angel, right? Like Archangel Michael, for example, is often like depicted as like male and in armor.
He's the best. Okay, so let's reel this back a little bit, or let's zoom out a little bit more. Battle of good and evil. The battle of good and evil, according to I guess the prescribed history that you and I have in common, would have started with Lucifer falling
Right.
out of God's favor, so to speak. And then Michael, who is now the best, kind of having to step up and be the next Christ, whereas Lucifer was once Christ.
Right.
Isn't it in the Bible even to like have the dragons fight each other in Revelation?
Good question. You know what? I think I spent a lot of time just being so mad at having to read the Bible that I just never read it in its entirety, just like hearing the pieces of it. Which is why now in my adult life I've been more steeped into the lore and trying to make heads or tails of it. So something to think about and to look up. Because there's this idea that the bad angels are fallen angels, right? They were expelled from heaven. But the actual term fallen angel doesn't appear in the Bible, nor in any other Abrahamic scripture that I'm aware of. But the term fallen angel comes from the book of, like, it's derived from the book of Enoch. It's basically, yeah, it's like the Lucifer wanted to be higher than God, right? Better than God. And then God's like, nope, that can't happen. So Lucifer was cast out. And then Lucifer, being like a really popular angel, I don't know what term to use here, had followers that also were like, yeah, why couldn't Lucifer be as good as God? Like, what makes him so hot? And then, kind of situation. And so supposedly there was this war, but what happened? What did it look like?
The war is within each and every one of us.
Mm.
The war of good and evil. We're the infantry in the world in the war of good and evil.
I mean, yeah, on a cosmic plane sense, like, are we like not living that war within ourselves? And it comes back to this idea of the luxury of sin. Because when we think about good or bad, it's often like in the Judeo-Christian sense, like in the light or not in the light, of the light or not of the light. So
right,
Lucifer,
black and white, good or bad.
yeah, but Lucifer was like all light, like the most of light. Like he was like the brightest star, right, in heaven. And so when God, I guess, decided that Lucifer, wanting to be more of light than he, said, well, that can't happen, so you need to be cast out. So then that became not of the light, but like
Cast into darkness.
cast into what darkness, right? Like
The
what
womb.
darkness did they actually cast into? Was it earth? Was it, like you're no longer of the of you're no longer in the cool club. So he's like, well, I'm gonna start my own club.
He did, yeah. He,
And that ultimately brought us to like this idea of we're fighting good and evil, and like, what does it mean? And I don't know. But then when we bring in this idea of light and of the light and not of the light, it kind of makes it kind of more complex, because then if a fallen angel is no longer of the light, I'm using air quotes here, then are they still able to reflect, right? Are they still a reflection of that source? But if they're from that source, how could they not? Can you take something away from its source and then say that it's no longer from that source?
well, you can't say that it's no longer from it. The question, I think, would be in the present, is it?
Okay, that's fair.
But you cancel, you delete history, you delete ancestral memory or genetic memory or cosmic genetic memory or however far you want to go out, and you don't have a story anymore. So you don't know.
Hmm.
So
So there's go ahead.
I was going to tell you about that dream again.
Okay.
It was kind of a waking dream after uh regression meditation of sorts to discover soul origin, which is a cool concept because we're not just popping out of the same cosmic womb type of thing. Very, very washed uply speaking. In this regression, and I did not have a preconceived, I didn't have this story preconceived within me. I didn't remember it like this, essentially. This came out
Okay.
of left field. Um, and I went back to being a consciousness that was, I knew, the size of a galaxy.
Right.
Yeah. And I was looking at what I would call the universe. And I was looking at other galaxies, and it was fast. It was fast,
Hmm.
real time for me. And the galaxies were moving. And I was standing still, and standing still as a galaxy. I was observing. I knew what was happening. I knew that this world was about to blow, that everything at every level was about to die. And I knew that I wanted to hack the system. And I knew that I wanted to attempt to save my consciousness in a way, my individual
Hmm.
consciousness. And I also knew that there was one individual that was supremely powerful. And I knew he was my brother, and I knew that I loved him. And I knew
Mhm.
that that was the formula I needed to survive.
Hmm.
So, in that final moment when things started going colorful, uh, I just held my love for Lucifer so close
Hmm.
to me, and I woke up. There's a couple of stories now. Timelines split, like it doesn't go to one consciousness into another. It goes from one consciousness into other very similar type consciousnesses, if not just one, if not
Sure.
just one. I'm not sure. But that consciousness does know the story. And for some reason, it also explains the existence of what a witch would call their familiar. I don't know what, like,
The connection.
I've explored more of that in my life as a psychonaut, but that will take, that's a lot of other like associations building, you know, these mind kingdoms. I don't know.
Well, let's see if these discussions can lead us to making more connections about that. I think that's fascinating, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, well, and that's probably why I think of it as neutral, because there is some kind of, and I don't know if it's my memory. It could be mine. It could not be mine. I don't think that matters. It's just what I asked for an experience, for a psychological experience that seemed to match what I asked for. That seemed to present itself to me. That seemed to satiate the request. So yeah, but that would be kind of like the fall as well, or like a fall, because we don't know how individual our universe is.
My mind is racing because it always comes back to how this idea of like the fallen angels being, are they good? Are they bad? What does it mean? And like biblically, these things come up again in my mind. Where have you ever heard of the story of Enoch and Elijah?
If you saw me looking back a million times earlier, like about 3, I was looking for the Book of Enoch. It's
okay.
Yes.
So Enoch and Elijah are known as the two witnesses, or two prophets. Elijah was the one that was carried in a chariot of fire, like in a chariot. Okay, let me just parenthese for a moment, right? So this prophet was carried in his physical body up in a chariot of fire into space.
Seeing the lands. Yeah. Well, it's kind of semi-identified flying up.
Yeah. But Enoch, the book of Enoch is really interesting because that's where the stories of angels coming down to earth and wanting to like sleep with the beautiful women comes up. Does that sound familiar to you?
Sure does.
And so there's a reference in the book of Enoch and in other books that are not in the Bible but are like Islamic and Judaic texts that reference heavenly beings called the Watchers.
Yeah.
And in the book of Daniel, there's a couple of mentions of these Watchers who are considered people like the holy people, holy ones that are like the Watchers in Greek is translated to being awake, being woke, I guess. And
W, or capital W.
yeah, capital W for Watchers. And so
woke.
Hmm?
For woke.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
after these angels fell from the fallen angel idea, right? There's some of these angels are on earth. And so after they fell, they became enamored with human women. So this is where the whole idea of like the what's it called? The giants comes from, the Nephilim, I guess. So angels would show up to Enoch's door, and he had these beautiful daughters, and the angels were like, we want to know your daughters. And he's like, you're an angel, like what the fuck, like no, like get out of here, like you shouldn't want these things, kind of thing. And I don't know if I'm getting messed up between Enoch and Elijah in this case.
I actually thought Enoch was the one that went up in a chariot of fire, but I didn't correct you because Elijah could have, and I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's Elijah that went up in the chariot of fire. But all that to say that the term of the Watchers is such an interesting term because it comes up in a lot of different early Christianity and Catholicism and Orthodoxy and Islam. And they seem to be the ones that are the fallen angels. So the illicit unions between these angels, the watchers, and humans is what brings on this demonic offspring.
So what I gather from that is, yeah, okay, so spirit that we're gonna call angels, in literally incarnated. But like, because the whole of the like the logic where it doesn't add up is that like, did these angels come in flesh embodied vessels?
mm,
In which case they would be extraterrestrials
mm,
and not as exciting. Or like exciting, sure, but not nearly as exciting as a like, I think anyways, the concept of a meta-terrestrial, which is an
mm,
extraterrestrial of spirit, I guess. But no, it's not extra, it's meta. It
mm,
consumes all. So it would be like, because it doesn't, it with all that framework, it makes sense to be a spirit embodied animal, like human. What, where, okay, like, did I, like, would I always put myself right into the middle, in the middle of these scenarios. Did I fuck a spirit or another animal? Then
okay, but when we think about like
they
just
came down
basic
as
Christian lore,
giants. They
oh no,
they created the giants.
yes, but like in basic Christian lore, like Jesus, right, was God
Yeah, the
incarnate
birthday.
humans.
Yes.
So
Okay. So what kind of mystery school did they have like seancing? Like I believe that those human beings would have given some kind of, you know, esoteric consent.
I'm saying if a beautiful angel showed up and said, I want to have babies with you,
Could have
I
been.
wouldn't be like, no. Be like, you're beautiful, you're an angel, right? Like they're
So the theories are what, like, it's a completely psychological experience that results in a natural biological change. It's a non-sexual insemination from uh,
well,
a holy yeast from another world. Like,
yeast, I like that. Well, with the case
oh,
of okay, so with the case of the Virgin Mary, right, where it was announced by an archangel, Gabriel, that she was now pregnant. Holy yeast situation, right? Where there's this from God, literally the source was now, yeeting the yeast into her body so that she can now bring to human form an incarnation of God. So that was okay, but in the past, this was already happening, right? Where angels who are closer to that source but not quite the source, after being exiled, came down to earth and then wanted to procreate with the humans. But what came out of that was considered demonic, whereas,
because it was black magic child rearing.
but then,
The
I mean,
black just means like, yeah, I want to do it. Yeah.
yeah, but then like, Mary didn't have consent. She's 14-year-old girl going
Yeah,
whatever
well,
age.
that's the twist Christianity put on a lot of things, isn't it?
Hmm.
Oh, this story is your origin. Let's tell it to you again. Let's make you the main character and let's take your consent away.
Hmm. I'm
So,
reading something interesting here about the book of, I don't know this, but the Book of Jubilees is an ancient Jewish religious book. And it's also canonical in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is super interesting. And it refers to the Watchers, and it says, who are among the angels and created on the first day. Okay. However, unlike the first book of Enoch, the Watchers are commanded by God to descend to earth to instruct humanity. Oh,
so they're like,
it is only after they decided to copulate with humans that they were transgressing the laws of God. So the idea is that God created these watchers, these angels to watch over and instruct humans. But they were like, oh, these humans are pretty cool, let's have babies. And then that became where God was like, nope, no more watchers for you, y'all are cast out and now you're considered demons. And so instead of the watchers, now we have the idea of like guardian angels who are, if we remember, much lower in that sphere.
So okay, so what it feels like now is that these angelic spiritual beings that came to see the creation inspired the humans to procreate in such a way through them that they embodied the souls of their children, or that their souls were able to embody the vessels of their children, and had that much more light source in their genes expressing itself. Because like
Yes,
our genes don't express as much as they can, right?
because it says that these offsprings of these unions, sorry for cutting you off, I apologize, go for it.
Go for it.
The offspring of these unions and the knowledge they were giving corrupted human beings and the earth, according to chapter 10 of Enoch 1, verse 11 and 12.
Yeah, so it also sounds like, unless they're all channeling gods perfectly, that there wasn't the forgetting. There wasn't the forgetting in these giant babies. They came in with knowledge.
Yes, it introduced man to like forbidden knowledge that we weren't supposed to have, because instead of watching and teaching, they were basically making humans woke. I mean, this is supposing that we're talking about like humans beginning with the like supposed Adam and Eve. And even that is entirely debatable with the lore of the Bible.
The last extinction event was 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they get away with saying up to 10,000 years old.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So we know that. Okay. So like when we talk about fallen angels, I can't help but think Atlantis. I can't help but think other worlds, right? Not other worlds, this world, but
other incarnations of this world on different timelines. And that brings the thought of like, is Adam and Eve, was this kind of like the next, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Test tube experiment to be like, well, that didn't work, so let's try this new situation. Because
like I'm sooner to think that those who went on were those who went on, but the story changed, like the social narrative changed. So this story of Adam and Eve was introduced. So we can see when there are nuanced things that happen in the news, they go viral because it's new. It doesn't have to be good or bad. People will consume new. Like people will adopt it. People will make it their own. And it's funny how Christianity, or I'm reducing it to Christianity. I realize I should say monotheism, maybe, gave us this battle between good and evil, but it also gave us individuation. Whereas before we were more tribal, we were more animal, right? So we need to find individuation through harsh separation. Like separation feels bad, which is the bad in this battle. And then, well, there's a lot now.
I think we're onto something here, because this idea of like, angels and good and bad, and that not being relevant anymore, the good and bad not being relevant. I like this idea that the watchers were, they were cast out, right? For doing these things.
Separated.
Or for, after like, basically they were basically teaching magic to humans to produce offspring with them.
Thank you for summarizing what I was trying to say. I'm just not saying it. That was pretty much it. Yeah. Teaching magic to humans.
And this is where the whole idea of like witches and like all that stuff comes from, where it's like these watchers that were supposed to watch over and guide humans were instead very intimate with them, so much so that they imbued part of their genetic information, power, in whatever, that gave them knowledge, humans and these new humans, or demons or witches or whatever, more knowledge than what humans originally had, which correspondingly made God pissed.
We're gonna have to unpack God pretty soon. Not soon, but yeah.
Because that mirrors Adam and Eve, right? With the whole Garden of Eden and having the tree of knowledge. Like, we know that the tree is called the tree of knowledge. God is like, don't eat from that tree of knowledge. It will give you too much knowledge. So much so that you will have to be cast out into the world, because now you won't want to live in Eden because you know too much. You know there's a world outside of here with more information, with more power, which more whatever. They wouldn't want to have been in Eden. Why would you want to be given a playground for, where you can like do nothing all day when you have this calling to do something greater, to reflect more light, to reflect more whatever.
Well, yeah, so this is it. So there is stress involved in separating from, let's say the womb, like the Garden of Eden. Like there is a lot of stress that happens there. But that new spark of consciousness desires more.
Yeah.
Right? So the desire of more conquers the fear of what? And the journey of the soul, and I believe it's a toroidal figure, but we'll go into that, is it's propelled out, it's separated further and further, it gains its own consciousness, it cannot lose consciousness, so it gains its own consciousness away from the light, perhaps. So the light is this centralized system, right? Like I am, I am, right? That's the light. I am. The southern quarter, governed by Michael, who is like God, the solar center, light, like God. So like, yeah, like it's not, that's what I think I mean by there's nothing lesser than, it's all neutral on this hierarchy, on this spectrum, because you might not be like God at a certain point, but you get to be more yourself. Like the further away from God you are, the more self you are, and the journey and the way to have that cycle propel itself, inspiring these battles of good and evil on their on their light offspring. I don't know.
But again, this is coming down from our place of like speaking from a Judeo-Christian, like especially kind of Christian-centered view. And I'm learning so much just from like researching about this topic.
Brostar, you feel like this is good for today?
Yeah, I think this is good because it's given me a lot of insight as to what I want to research next and what I want to talk about next. And
Prepared.
yeah,
Names.
because it's bringing back a lot of lore that I remember, like the story of Elijah and the story of Enoch. It's stories that I remember being told as a kid with the goal of saying, see, if you defy God, he'll basically burn your whole village down. And if you look back, then everything you love will be turned to dust. But there isn't this idea of like, why was this happening? Like why were the angels there in the first place, right? And this city that was burned down was basically a very modern city where there's a lot of sin happening. There's a lot of like
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, it was Sodom and Gomorrah. You're right. This brings it all back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Holy shit, I forgot. So putting the together
Yeah. Turns to salt.
turns to salt. That's the one. That's the one. Yeah. So angels were beautiful. Went to see Enoch. Enoch had these beautiful daughters. They were like, "We want to know your daughters." He's like, "No, you're angels. That's weird." And then God spoke to Enoch and was like, "Listen, like this place is shit. Like all the Watchers are wanting to like f all the humans, and like that's like not cool. So before y'all get like demon baby power, witch powers, magic powers, I'm just gonna like click delete on
Ooh,
this
yeah,
entire
you will.
thing." And then fast forward, and then you get like test tube baby Adam and Eve.
Well, you can't kill off bacteria with just one flood.
No.
They're gonna come back. You just need to condition them properly this time.
Well, that's why he put them in the Garden of Eden, right? So he can condition them to the way that he wanted.
I mean, or just told the story. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
just the story told.
And he's like, "Listen, like you live in a garden. It's perfect here. You have everything you need. Everything outside is evil. If you eat this one specific thing, you will have to leave and go into this outside world." That doesn't mean that there wasn't other humans. They probably were already woken because of the interactions from the Watchers, right? And then this derived from the fallen angel situation with like Lucifer wanting to have that power to give to others, whereas God's like, no, just for me, gonna start over again. And then this happens canonically in the Bible a lot, right? With like Noah as well, right? Like the world kind of being like flooded and like, let's start over. Like, let's choose these, like, this is my hope. These are the seeds of my hope. These are the ones that like worked out kind of situation.
Lucifer did have to make friends since has a flesh home now. Did like, look, I'll give you rational thought.
Yeah. Like,
There
why wouldn't you want to eat from the tree
yeah.
of knowledge?
Was that? Well, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, because why not? Because curiosity. Because now there's a desire for more, and desire always conquers whatever else there is.
Who created that desire, right? There was this temptation, right? This temptation
Talking
that
to
came from
itself.
the serpent, right? So like it so happened that Eve was there first.
No. The what created the desire was her own selfhood,
Yeah,
her own
absolutely.
agency and autonomy. It was introduced perhaps
Yes,
by this other entity that was
yes,
a charismatic sweet talker, so to speak.
right.
Right? Like they get away with shit. It's true. But I have to cut you off there and be like, no. It was something within built into her that
Hmm.
was able to say, yeah, I will accept this
Yeah,
curiosity.
because they were sheltered, right? They were sheltered in this garden where they
There
didn't
was
have,
no more. There was no more.
yeah, right?
Just
And
what
so this sweet talker shows up and he's like, "Don't you want to know more? Don't you want to know about what's going on?" So she's like, "Yeah, you know what? I do. That would be cool, actually." And like, why would he tell me not to if you know? And it's interesting that like this imagery of the serpent comes up again because one of the consequences of the serpent is when God finds out that this happens, takes away the serpent's legs. So it was literally a dragon, which brings us back to the imagery of the seraphim and the cherubim coming back to earth, coming down on earth, and what they looked like, which ties back to the Watchers, ties back to devils, ties everything back together. And so the goal is when the point of what I'm trying to say is when God finds out that they ate from the tree and they had the knowledge that they were now no longer like the innocent kind of like children in daddy's eyes, um he banished them, but he also he also transformed the serpent and got rid of its legs, got rid of its mobility.
So
And that's why serpents slither on their bellies, supposedly.
yeah, no, it like listening to that made me think of like this war of good and evil. Ultimately, like Satan, or not Satan. Whoa, crass, whoa. Uh, this entity that we are calling, let's say, Lucifer now, that fell and brought his cronies with him, who are all super smart and cool. He I'm just saying he came into animal form, like perhaps that was the beginning of the war, of this war of good and evil. Perhaps that was a strategic move in the war.
Yeah, I think it was more strategic move. Yeah.
So the other side is telling his children that this is the starting point, because this is where he gets the most sympathy. And I'm not like Church of Lucifer over here, like I'm not. But
No, neither am I. Just like disclaimer, like I'm not like a
nature is
Luciferian
Satan's
and
church. Nature is Satan's church, and I go to church. But anyways, yeah, so like this war is being fought within each and every one of us, because just our talking about it, just the way we choose to identify ourselves and our selfhood through whatever meaning these things give to us, through rejection of them or absorption, acceptance of them, through thinking of them as just a story, thinking of them as myth, legend, whatever, right? Yeah, angels are cool. Messengers, because maybe the only time we get to actually interact with them, it's through interaction. Like we might not even comprehend or have ever interacted with any other of their functions, right? But who knows? So there are still questions, there are still things. Next time we'll continue this, or perhaps throw in something bigger and more simpler.
I mean, I think we're building onto something really interesting, because like really we're trying to come down to the like what is good and what is evil situation. And one thing I want to leave us with maybe to think about is I found something really interesting. And so there's this phrase, the phrase good and evil actually could simply mean everything.
Yeah.
Because there's an Egyptian expression called evil good, which basically means the word everything.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to send you the link to what I found.
Oh.
And this is very interesting, because then the knowledge of good and evil then just becomes knowledge.
It just becomes knowledge. Woo! I'm gonna drink to that later.
Yes. And so this idea of the tree of knowledge, eating from the tree of knowledge, doesn't make it evil. It just makes you have more knowledge.
It just gives you
And
everything.
when your worldview now expands beyond the world that you were born into, like so, like the Garden of Eden being that worldview, when you eat from the tree of knowledge, it expands beyond that worldview. So they had to leave.
Yeah. They burst out of their egg.
And so they were, maybe encouraged to eat from the tree of knowledge, because why would you not want
That's the way
knowledge?
to open the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, God is like, don't eat the tree of knowledge. Stay here, stay ignorant, stay blissful.
Like the soup of genetic memory and guilt and fear.
Yeah.
All.
And it's a lot, right? Because they ate the fruit and they felt shame and they
Yeah.
felt naked and
Brostar, the key to leave that world, that primordial soup, is choosing something for the self. Saying,
yeah.
actually, no, I will do that.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're born in the world.
Yeah. And suddenly then, like Eve had pain to like, when she was delivering her children, and then Adam had to work really hard because he wasn't just like eating free fruit off of like bacon trees or whatever.
Something tells me that's another like extra hyper modern,
Yeah. Well, let's get into that next episode.
We shall. All right, Brostar, it was lovely.
It was lovely. Take care, Brostar.
Bye, internet.